Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 1st of March, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, another reminder from Trent Van Epps here today, as part of his ongoing series of, tweets about what's going to happen when the merge goes through or post-merge. So today's tweet was, the merge / proof of stake will not reduce fees on mainnet. Now, this is something that I have been tooting the horn about for months now. And I've told you guys that I see plenty of people out there thinking that the merge or proof of stake or ETH2, whatever you want to call it, is going to significantly or materially reduce gas fees on layer 1 mainnet. Now, as you all know, it was not going to do this. It basically has no effect. The block times are going from 13 seconds to 12 seconds, but that is not really going to have a material effect. As you have seen over the last few weeks, though, that when the activity on chain goes down, the gas fees go down. At the end of the day, guys, the gas fees, the fee market is really just a function of supply and demand. Demand for block space, supply, is limited. So when there's more demand, the prices go up. When there's less demand, the prices go down. Simple as that. There is literally, it's not complicated. But the thing is, the merge / proof of stake does not do anything to reduce fees. Obviously, as you guys know, Ethereum's taking the modular scaling approach, so to reduce fees, we're leveraging layer 2s, and layer 1 improvements will go towards improving layer 2s as well. So, and Trent goes on to say in his tweet, smaller blocks / slot times do increase available block space, but not significantly. That's that 13 seconds to 12 seconds block times that I talked about. An average block space is only one input, which influences fees, the other being demand. As I mentioned, near-term scaling and lower fees will be on layer 2s. And I actually would say near-term and even long-term would just be on layer 2s. But I think what Trent's saying here is that, once the merge is done, we're going to be really, really focused on getting these layer 1 upgrades done. Obviously sharding, dank sharding, statelessness, state expiry, EIP 4488 to reduce costs for rollups, and blob, adding blob transactions and stuff like that. All that's going to help significantly with scaling Ethereum, but that is not happening at the time of the merge. The merge is literally, as I mentioned before, just going from proof of work to proof of stake. That's the only thing that happens, guys. We're just hot swapping out the consensus mechanism. Now, I'm making it sound simple, but it's not. It's obviously a very big undertaking and it's a very big achievement, but the end users really aren't going to feel anything from this, I don't think. I think the most the end users will feel is more predictable block times, but even then, I don't think there's going to be much difference felt there. But in saying that, shortly after that, hopefully about 6 months after that, we'll have the Shanghai update go live, which brings more scalability to layer 2s. But layer 2s already are getting so cheap lately, guys. I know they're also influenced by the layer 1 gas cost, but a swap on Arbitrum and Optimism right now is $1 to $2, I think I saw it at. That's pretty crazy, right? For leveraging Ethereum security. I know, you can get cheaper swaps elsewhere, and that's all well and good. But I think, the costs have come down a lot. They were $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 for a swap, right? Now we're at the $1 and $2 mark. As I said, influenced by layer 1 gas fees to an extent, but also these rollups are doing significant improvements on their own without having to touch layer 1 or change layer 1. They're optimizing themselves and bringing more efficiency at layer 2. Arbitrum doesn't even have Nitro live yet, and they've managed to squeeze out all of these improvements. So very, very awesome to see that. But if you want to, read Trent's previous tweets, there's 3 other tweets here about what's happening, going into the merge. You can just click through. He's quote tweeted it each time he's talked about it. So definitely go check those out. And for those of you who don't know, Trent has been around for a while. I talk about him a lot on the Refuel. He's an ecosystem person at the Ethereum Foundation, so he's across pretty much everything got to do with core dev. I would say, like I mentioned yesterday, how Ben Edgington is really great with keeping up into the weeds with ETH2 stuff. I would say that Trent is really great on keeping up with pretty much everything on the ETH1 and ETH2 stuff, but maybe from a bit of a higher level, but also from the community level as well. Like he's very involved in, talking to different people within the community, different projects and stuff like that, and making sure that they're all ready for major upgrades. He was instrumental in making sure a lot of the wallets and infrastructure providers were ready for ERP 1559, and he still helps helps them to this day. And he's also the guy behind Stateful Works, which is a kind of like initiative for Ethereum cultural artifacts. And I've talked about this before. There was the 1559 NFT series, which was run by Stateful Works, and there was also the book, the Beacon book that was kind of produced by Stateful Works as well. So Trent's doing a lot of great work, and I'm loving these tweets from him lately. All right, so Superphiz shared that Avado now offers support for running RocketPool mini pools. So as Superphiz says here, this improves access to a decentralized staking solution for many people who otherwise couldn't participate. So for full details, you can check out the blog post, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. I think they only support Prism right now, it seems. And then Avado kind of replied and said they're planning to support multiple options before the ETH2 merge, and they are monitoring the development closely. So, and then they say client diversity is one of their goals. We were supporting other Beacon chain implementations as well. That, it's pretty cool. I mean, obviously, the fact that they just have Prism right now, maybe a deal breaker for some people that don't want to spin up the supermajority client, which is totally fine. But I'm sure they'll be adding other ones relatively soon. Now, for those of you who don't know what Avado is, basically they build themselves as a plug-and-play blockchain computer to run dApps. Essentially, you can go to their website, you can purchase one of their Avado kind of boxes here, which comes preloaded with an operating system that allows you to just kind of do a one-click install of different kind of blockchain nodes, clients, validators, all that good stuff there. And it makes it super simple to do those sorts of things. And not just for the blockchains themselves, but now for the services around them, like RocketPool and a bunch of other ones too. So if you don't know what Avado is, haven't checked them out before, definitely do so. I mean, you can just go to their website, like here at ava.do. You can kind of see here, there's the AvadoCloud use cases, hardware you can buy from them. You buy little NUCs, kind of like Avado i7, and they give you a price and everything here. And then there's different kind of models as well. So you can go check this out if you want. Just a simple kind of box to run nodes on, to run your staking software on, all that sort of stuff. I personally opted to build my own, as you guys know, my own staking box. It used to be in the background of my videos, simply because I wanted full and total control over the hardware. Plus I wanted it to look cool as well. Not to say that these boxes look bad or anything, but they're quite simple, right? They're just, if I go to the hardware, as you saw, they're quite simple kind of boxes. Looks a little bit like a modem or a router or something like that, which is totally fine. I mean, if you just want it to blend in, this is a great solution for you. But for me, I wanted a bit of more aesthetic to mine. As you can see around me, I love having things on display around me, so I opted for the kind of more the more noisy kind of setup there. But it's all just kind of the same parts at the end of the day. I mean, as I said, there's different kind of specs of the Avado hardware. There's the i7, which is an Intel i7 with 32 gig of RAM, 2 terabytes of SSD storage, and it's fanless as well, which means it's 100% silent. That'll set you back 1600 USD, but this is kind of the top of the range one. So this will allow you to do everything that you need to do in order to run, obviously, an ETH2 validator, Beacon node, and an ETH1 node. But you'll also be able to kind of run other nodes and other kind of validators and other networks as well. So if you just want to kind of run an Ethereum full node and just stake, then the Avado i5 would definitely be fine for you, and that will set you back $1,099 US. So yeah, there's a few different options there for you to choose from, but as always, you can build it yourself if you want to. And the cool thing is about the software is that the software can be installed on any hardware, the software that's on the Avado. So, I mean, I've gone blank on the name right now. There's a specific name for the software that I've just kind of forgotten here. But yeah, I've installed it on other kind of pieces of hardware before, and it works fine. So there's no need to buy an Avado kind of plug and play device if you don't want to. But that's probably the easiest way to get started with all of this. All right, so L2Beat has a new diagram on zkSync's page that kind of explains how zkSync's smart contracts work. So you can go to the page here. I'll link it in the YouTube description, but it kind of shows how smart contracts work on zkSync, or sorry, how the zkSync smart contracts work. So you can see here the main rollup contract is identified with the verifier, with the upgrade gatekeeper, and with the governance contract as well. So as you guys know, L2Beat provides more information about the L2s than literally any other website in existence by far. I mean, this is the only website that I use for all this information. I don't think it's documented anywhere except maybe the official websites of the different kind of, L2s out there. But even then, it's kind of buried in their documentation. Not on purpose, but just because they have a lot of documentation. Whereas on L2Beat, it just kind of pulls all the relevant information out. It highlights it in red. It tells you kind of what the biggest risks are. It gives you links to all the different kind of contracts and stuff like that, which is what we want to see. And kind of their latest edition is kind of zkSync's contracts. Obviously, zkSync's been getting a lot of attention lately because they have the zkEVM on testnet, but this is really, really cool to see that there's just kind of more stuff here. And there's obviously links to more references and resources. The funny thing is that you can go to the L2beat.com website, click onto each of these L2s, scroll down, read all the stuff on L2B, and then click through to each of these kind of like references to learn even more about all of this sort of stuff. And you can probably spend a good like week, 2 weeks or something, just going through all of this. Like, not straight, right? But like, you could spend like a good amount of time just going through each of these projects and then going to the references and kind of like reading about how it all works. And you'll learn pretty much everything there is to learn about L2s at this stage, I would say. I mean, they're all implementing different kind of like solutions. Obviously, some are optimistic rollups, some are ZK rollups, some are Validiums. Some are even plasma, some are hybrids. I mean, there's so much going on. But you know, clicking through and reading about the different solutions and reading all the different resources out there is probably the best way to get caught up with everything layer 2. Like, and that's if you want to become like a layer 2 expert, right? Don't do all of that if you're just interested in staying at the high level of the L2 stuff, which you probably only need the refuel for that. But if you want to dig deep, really deep, you can do that. And they link to the documentation of each of the kind of like solutions. I mean, if I'm just on Arbitrum's page now, you can go to the Arbitrum documentation, which is at developer.offchainlabs.com, and you can see kind of like everything here and go through the developer kickstart tutorials, you know, how the messaging works. I mean, look at all these guys. Like, this is just one section. This is messaging between layers. There's token bridging, confirmation and finality. Like, I mean, even as a non-dev, you can just read through all of this and kind of like see all the stuff that's gone into this sort of stuff and how, you know, kind of like not complex it is, but how detailed it is and how much kind of like thought has gone into everything there. So definitely do that if you're interested in learning more about L2. And, you know, as I said before, the perfect time to learn about this sort of stuff is when the market is quiet. I know the market seems to be kind of like heating back up again, but when I say market being quiet, I mean like we're in this kind of like range and there's just kind of like not many people around, and the things are much quieter. I mean, Twitter is still so quiet. I mean, the most things I'm seeing on Twitter lately is just the Ukraine-Russia stuff. I hardly even see much crypto stuff anymore, but just generally with the crypto stuff, it's still super quiet. And if there is talk about it, it's usually about the Ukraine-Russia stuff, which, to be honest, I mean, I'm glad there's a lot of talk about that, because obviously, you know, this is crypto's kind of like moment. A lot, like, crypto is really entering the mainstream here. I mean, just today, actually, not to go off topic here, but I think this is pretty on topic. But just today, we saw that, I believe, one of the Western governments kind of like ordered that the centralized exchanges make it hard for Russia to get around their sanctions by using centralized exchanges. So obviously, I guess crypto, at least on the centralized exchange side, is pretty much integrated with the financial system at this point. Like, it is considered part of the worldwide financial system, which is pretty wild to think about. And at the end of the day, we are building these tools like Ethereum, you know, Bitcoin, the layer 2s, all that sort of stuff to be neutral. So the governments can't order Ethereum to basically block transactions or censor transactions or freeze funds or anything like that. Obviously, that's still all possible if the network is being kind of like overtaken by a 51% attack, or if the miners decide to collude and censor transactions. But it's extremely difficult. It is very unlikely to happen on Ethereum and Bitcoin, that is. But on other chains, you know, it's easier. Like, there are some chains out there that are just super centralized, that it's very easy to kind of like block this stuff up. So I think, you know, people have laughed at me before by when I've said that these kind of like blockchains need to resist nation states, because if they can't do that, then they're pointless. Well, I don't think people are going to be laughing for very much longer, guys. I mean, this is the time where decentralization does get tested. Like, if the governments around the world, the US government, the European governments, the Asian governments, if they all kind of like came together and had the same narrative where they're like, well, we need to stop, you know, whether it's Russia or someone else, we need to stop them using crypto to get around our sanctions. Well, I mean, they'll go for the centralized exchanges first, which is obviously the path of least resistance. Then they probably go for stablecoins. They'll ask stablecoin issuers to freeze addresses that they suspect, not that they can prove, but that they suspect are involved with illicit activity. And of course, it's going to get frozen straight away, because the centralized exchanges or the centralized operators of these stablecoins are not going to say no to the US government. They're going to be like, okay, well, I mean, we'll freeze it for now, but like, kind of like, if they want to push it further, they can fight it and basically be like, well, we'll freeze it, but you guys gonna have to kind of like prove to us why we froze it, sort of thing. But still, I mean, you're not going to be going up against the US government as a centralized crypto exchange based in the US, right? You can try. I mean, you can take them to court and things like that later on, but in the heat of the moment, especially during times like this, yeah, it's not going to work. And then, you know, what happens if there's evidence of these countries that have been sanctioned using blockchains to get around the sanctions? Well, the governments are not going to sit idly by and basically let that happen. What they're going to do is they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to realize that they can't control Ethereum and Bitcoin, or, and this is probably the more likely outcome, I should say, they're going to try and control it. They're going to try and see which ones they can control, which ones they can shut down, which ones they can block access to. And to be honest, I mean, they can block access to Ethereum and Bitcoin via ordering centralized exchanges to block withdrawals to those networks. But that's the worst they can do there. They can't overtake the network. They can't force the miners and in the future validators to censor transactions or anything like that. They're powerless there. But that's for Ethereum and Bitcoin. When it comes to other chains, there are certain things they can do. A lot of the DPoS chains have a very small validator set that can control the network that are based in jurisdictions where these governments reside, such as the US and Europe. So that's going to be the true test, guys. Like that, at the end of the day, you don't know what's truly decentralized, I think, and you can't. It's kind of like you can't really prove it until these things kind of like show their true colors, that show that they have no clothes. And I think we're going to get to that point sooner rather than later. But yeah, a little bit of a tangent there, I guess, but I think it's very, very relevant to what we're seeing lately. And I do think that people are going to realize more and more why decentralization matters at the end of the day. All right, so Orbiter Finance has another update today that they now support StarkNet on Görli. So you can choose StarkNet on Orbiter.finance and bridge StarkNet into testnet. So this is cool. I mean, I've been covering Orbiter recently, but now they're kind of like supporting StarkNet Görli. And obviously, as you guys know, StarkNet is both on testnet and mainnet, which is really, really cool to see. But it's cool to see Orbiter Finance just like getting up there. I mean, I only started talking about these guys maybe 2 months ago or something like that. They came out of kind of nowhere. I mean, I wonder when their Twitter account was created. Okay, the Twitter account was created January 2014, so it must have been repurposed there. But I don't think these guys have been around for very long. So very cool to see them. I guess they're still in alpha, but very cool to see them adding networks really quickly and kind of like getting their name out there. And it's just great to see more bridges coming online. Obviously, as I've talked about, there's a lot of risks using these sorts of things, which actually is a perfect segue into Lito Cohen's thread today. Lito Cohen kind of like works as growth at Hot Protocol, so he would know a thing or two about bridges. But basically, this is a thread about bridge security, and kind of like it's a really great thread. It goes through kind of like what can happen, the risks and the trade-offs and all that sort of stuff. So I suggest reading this thread. But since we saw the massive exploit with the wormhole bridge, there hasn't really been any other security incidents on bridges I've seen yet. But don't let that give you a false sense of security, guys. Like, that doesn't mean that these bridges are suddenly all super secure and everyone's funds are secure. No, you got to keep your kind of wits about you, especially when using newer protocols like Orbiter Finance, which is still in alpha. You really need to realize that alpha doesn't mean, hey, ape your whole net worth into this bridge and kind of like YOLO in. And no, that's not kind of like how it works there. You need to realize that alpha, beta, that they mean, this is still kind of like very risky software. This is still kind of like basically being tested, right? It's basically in the kind of like, maybe they're kind of like testing in prod, so to speak, on mainnet, but still, they shouldn't be treated as kind of like live, kind of like, super safe production software here. And, honestly, most things in crypto shouldn't be treated as super safe or really safe software. At the end of the day, as I said to you guys plenty of times before, every smart contract in existence has the possibility of having a bug in it, even if it's one line of code, can have a bug in it. And it's just kind of like a function of, I guess, like time as well. Like, the funny thing is about the time thing, I've had this discussion with many people before. People kind of argue that the longer a smart contract has been around, or the longer a set of code has been around, the safer it is. I don't actually necessarily agree with that, because there's been tons of examples of things in the Web 2 world that have existed for decades, and then there's a massive bug found in it, like a critical bug found in it, 10, 20 years later. Now, if that's the case, how do you kind of like trust any of this stuff? Well, I mean, there's kind of insurance protocols out there that you can kind of take insurance against. Maybe don't put like your whole net worth into one smart contract. Maybe spread out the risk. Say you're using kind of like 3 different yield farming protocols out there. That's better than just putting all your funds into kind of like one, because if one of them kind of gets hacked or something like that, then you kind of like are protected by being in the other two. Maybe your yield is less, but I guess that's kind of like the trade-off you take there. And then the protocols themselves are having their own, I guess, like insurance funds too to cover any losses that they suffer. So there are ways to kind of protect users, but I don't think anyone should ever say that a smart contract or any set of code is 100% secure and 100% bug free. It's just impossible to make that assertion. And if you do say that and later it gets kind of like hacked or anything like that, well, maybe you had the hubris to not prepare for that, and then the user funds are all gone. So I think just taking all that into account, guys. I mean, I know I've said before that one of the only protocols I kind of like trust with like a large amount of my net worth is, I guess like assets is Maker, and I've used it plenty of times before. But even Maker could have a critical bug in it. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't. And, I obviously have a lot of my ETH in staking right now on the Beacon chain. That code has only been live for like a year and 3 months at this point. It's not super secure either. You can't claim that it's like ultra secure. You can't claim that it has like Lindy or anything behind it. But I'm well aware of those risks. I take those risks, and that's on me if anything happens. But I think this is true for basically every piece of code. So just another friendly reminder for you guys to kind of like take precautions when using these sorts of things. See what would happen if an exploit was to happen. Like, will you be covered by the protocol itself? Is there kind of ways to take out insurance? How much would you stand to lose? All this sorts of stuff. So yeah, and definitely go give Lito Cohen's thread about bridge security and bridges here a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. So Rocco from the Spruce ID team published a blog post today called "Why Sign In With Ethereum is a Game Changer Part 1." So I highly recommend giving this blog post a read. Obviously, I'm not going to read it out on the Refuel. As I said before, sign in with Ethereum, on-chain identity, all this sort of stuff about, around kind of like this area is super important for, I guess, the growth of this industry. I often say that I think the two most important things that I'm most excited about to reach mass adoption are scaling and privacy. If I had to pick a third, it would be things like this, right? Like on-chain identity, sign in with Ethereum, because it's such a simple thing, but it's such a powerful tool. And I've explained why in previous episodes, so I won't go through this again, but I think, as I've said before, I'd much rather be able to sign in with Ethereum to things rather than having to sign in with Facebook or sign in with Twitter or a centralized service, because, you get portability, interoperability, composability, all that good stuff that we're used to within DeFi, all without an intermediary, all in a decentralized way, and be able to kind of like carry our identity with us. So very cool thing that you should give, you should give this blog post a read to learn more about this, how it works, some of the technicals behind it as well, and how it works on a technical level with signing messages. And a friendly reminder again, guys, signing a message on Ethereum does not cost gas fees. That's another shitty narrative out there. People actually believe that signing a message costs gas fees. I mean, you don't even have to believe anyone. Go sign a message on Ethereum mainnet right now. Like, go sign in with, sign into something with Ethereum right now. You don't have to. It's just sign, and that's it. Because all you're doing is signing a message using your private key. You're not doing an on-chain transaction. It's just so insane to me that these narratives persist. And it kind of like even more insane to me that the bad narratives, for some reason, are always the ones that are the most popular. And it goes back to this old adage. I don't know if Andreas Antonopoulos was the first one to say this, but I've heard him say it plenty of times before, is that kind of like bullshit just tends to spread 10 times faster than the truth. And then, trying to kind of like correct that bullshit is basically impossible from there. So yeah, anyway, go give this blog post a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. All right, so finally here we have a call out from the EF Ecosystem Support Program. They put out a tweet saying, calling all academics, research centers, PhD students, and others interested in researching Ethereum, we're excited to announce a new wave of $750,000 in grants to fund formal Ethereum-related research. Learn more and submit your project proposals by 22nd of April in this blog post. This is really cool. It's more money going towards core Ethereum research here, which is always a good thing to see. And this is coming directly from the Ethereum Foundation Support Program. So if you're interested in this, if this is something up your alley, definitely go check out the blog post. As I said, the deadline for applying for these grants is April 22nd, 2022. So you have about just over 6 weeks from now. But I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to check out. Now, I've got a few minutes left here. So one last thing I wanted to talk about, which is actually related to this, was about research in general within crypto and how I think that Ethereum has obviously been the leader for quite a while now in terms of like bleeding edge research and the most interesting things coming out of the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think that's going to be the case for a long while. But I do want to caution people from getting too kind of, I guess, like bottlenecked in things. Like, I don't think an echo chamber is the right word. I think people use the term echo chamber like in a really, in a really wrong way these days. They use it to deride people and say, you're just stuck in an echo chamber. You don't know what's going on around you. It's like, yeah, okay. I mean, some people may be stuck in that, but at the end of the day, like if you're only interested in keeping up with what's happening in Ethereum, and you're happy being in the Ethereum echo chamber, well, I mean, is that necessarily a bad thing? Like if you're happy, if you're aware of it, if you're just like, whatever, like I don't care about all the other stuff going on, I'm happy in Ethereum, then that's totally fine. As long as you're not kind of like spouting bullshit or deriding other ecosystems. I mean, the classic example of this is the Bitcoin maximalists who definitely live in their own echo chamber, but not only do they live in their echo chamber, they also kind of like yell outside of it, right? They yell at the Ethereum people, they say Ethereum's centralized, they say it's a scam, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. But if you just sit in Ethereum land, sort of like what I do, and you're not out there just spouting all the bullshit off and calling other projects scams and kind of like saying that it's all worthless, I think that's totally fine. But in saying that, there are interesting ideas out of other ecosystems that haven't come from Ethereum, right? Like, as I said, the vast majority of the coolest things that I've seen have been in the Ethereum ecosystem, but there are definitely ideas in other ecosystems that that are interesting. And, I've bashed Solana a lot in the past, but to Solana's credit, they're actually building a pretty decent execution layer. Now, the reason I've bashed Solana in the past is because I don't think that execution layer can work at quote-unquote layer 1 with their consensus engine. I think they're going to run into plenty of problems, and they already have, and I don't think it's going to scale to the world. But I mean, I reckon Solana can be a really great execution layer, meaning it could be a really great layer 2, and it doesn't even have to use Ethereum as a settlement layer. It could use any consensus engine that it limits itself at layer 1 as a settlement kind of layer. But at the end of the day, we may see someone just fork Solana, rip out the consensus and just kind of like settle it to Ethereum, and it'd be funny because what if it works better? Like I actually think objectively it would actually work better than the Solana chain itself because of the fact that it's taking the modular approach instead of doing the monolithic approach. But that's where credit should be due. Like Solana is a very different chain to Ethereum. They build things from the ground up. They're using Rust instead of Solidity. They're doing a lot of different things out there. But my problem with it has always been the thesis that you could scale everything at layer 1. I just don't think that's going to work, and we've already seen the pitfalls of that. And not just Solana, the Terra ecosystem is quite interesting with what they're doing with stablecoin, with UST. I know a lot of people call it a Ponzi and all that sort of stuff, but the longer it sticks around, the longer it actually works. Maybe it ends up working. Maybe I haven't called it a Ponzi, but maybe people are all wrong about that. Like, I don't know, but that's another interesting thing that's happening there. That's not happening in Ethereum. And, there are some pockets here and there of other things going on, but there's not really. I mean, a lot of the other L1s are just like EVM clones. They're not very, very interesting. And as I said, the vast majority of the interesting stuff is still happening on Ethereum. But, if you don't want to be in a quote-unquote like echo chamber and you're not happy being in an echo chamber, you want to kind of like expand a little bit, I would recommend going and kind of like looking into these other ecosystems to see what they've got going on. But as I said, most of it is not interesting, but there are pockets there. And you don't have to like go out and buy the tokens either if you don't want to. It's not like you have to basically go all in on the ecosystems or whatever, but essentially what you can do is you can just check out what they've got going on, and then you can see, okay, well, is there anything like this going on in Ethereum? Why not? Can I bring it to Ethereum? Can I do something here? It's just a cool thing to do, I think. And I've been doing this for a while now. It's not a new thing for me. I mean, it's funny because I always get called an ETH maxi, and I can bet you that I know more about a lot of the L1 ecosystems than their biggest fans do, because I do keep up with them, just not day to day in the detail in the weeds, but I do keep up with what they're doing to see if anything's actually innovative. And to be honest, guys, like I don't think any of the stuff that the other L1s are doing with regards to scaling is innovative at all. I think all the scaling innovation is happening basically on Ethereum, coupled with like the L2 stuff and the modular stack. And obviously there's other chains that aren't out yet, like Celestia, which is doing interesting things, and Polygon Veil and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, as I said, always good to branch out, but yeah, I mean, on my end, I haven't seen like anything too interesting, but there are pockets out there which are worth researching. But I think on that note, I'm going to leave it at that for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.